Hello fellow woodworkers and welcome to this week's edition of the Garage Workshop, and this week we're going to be making
router guides.
Roll the intro. So fellow woodworkers, for this week's video I'm going to be making some accessories for my Katsu palm router. Now I'm filming this just after New Year's Day 2025 and the great British weather has decided to go absolutely freezing overnight, so I've had to temporarily stop work on my other project and I'm moving on to the palm router. Now my palm router is a really cheap Katsu palm router. I did a 10-minute tool review for it, which I think actually was in my top 5 videos of 2024, and I'll put a link to that in the description of this video. But my one criticism of the Katsu router is it has a circular base and all of the attachments to it are all circular, which really doesn't help if you're trying to draw, if you're trying to route squares. Now I have got a router table obviously, but for some things that you work on in the workshop, you can't just pick them up and lug them over and drop them on top of the router table. So in this week's video, I'm just going to make a couple of different jigs and templates for my Katsu router to help me out in this build. Now, the first one is going to be a 3D printed jig, which I have found on Thingiverse. You've seen my video on the Bamboo A1 printer, hopefully again, link in the description for this one. So I'm going to first of all start by finding a square template. Let's print that out, get it on the router and see if it's any good. And I'm also going to make one out of wood. Let's go.
So I just thought I'd show you the process quickly of how easy it was to find and print this. It was really easy.
So fellow woodworkers, the first template I'm going to make is going to be out of 6mm MDF. Now I thought a lot about different woods I can use this for. I could use plywood. I've got some 6mm plywood, but to be honest with you, I always find it's not the greatest in terms of staying straight. I know MDF does, but obviously MDF has issues potentially around the edges. I've started off the 3D printed print for the one I found from Thingiverse, which you will have just seen. So I'm going to get this nice and straight and cut out a section that's bigger than I know it needs to be.
So I just leveled up the MDF, you know, as quickly as I could, but as equally as I could, and I was measuring all the way around to make sure all the edges were absolutely straight.
Okay, so I've now cut this piece of 6mm MDF down to, well, it's not a square, but every single edge on it, as you will have just seen, is completely straight. And this is the base plate that I got with my Katsu router. Now the reason that I went for the Katsu router, if you've seen the video, just as a reminder, the reason that I went for it was it's basically exactly the same as the Makita router in every sort of respect. All of the accessories for the Makita routers all fit, palm routers all fit the Katsu one, and I know that's true because I printed one of these out on my 3D printer. Let me just grab it. It's here, and as you can see, it is identical in every way, with the only difference being this one is slightly, and I mean ever so slightly, let me see if I can demonstrate. My one that I 3D printed is very, very slightly thinner. Not a lot in it at all, really. I don't even know if you can buy a replacement one, but if you bought a Makita replacement for that, it is going to cost you quite a lot of money. The only other thing is here, on the back of the original one, you should be able to see there's a little groove. Hopefully you can see that in there, and that's not on my one, but to be honest, that's not an issue. So now that I've got this, I'm just going to draw some lines around the edge of this block, just sort of guidelines, and I'm going to get this laid exactly on those two edges to get it nice and straight, so that I know I've got the same border around the edge. I could do it by sticking some wood around the edge, but to be honest, I think I'll just draw some lines around. Let's see how that goes, and then I'll have a closer idea, and then all I'll need to do is just drill through the holes. I'll need to sort of plug them in some way, countersink them in some ways, and then obviously I'll need to get a Forstner bit and just drive straight through the top. So let's carry on and make it now. Okay, so I've just set my square. Let's see how in the middle that is. That's perfect on that side. And it's perfect on that side. So I know it's in exactly the right place on these two sides. So I'm going to mark it now. Let me see where it is on this side at the top. In fact, I'm just going to mark the holes now. So if it shifts. And what I want to try and do here is leave enough of an edge around it that it's all sort of fairly equal. I mean, it doesn't have to be, but... Okay, let's see how we're doing. Oh, needs to go up a little bit there. Right, let's try that now. Yeah, still the same. Okay, so I know that's now exactly in the middle. I'm just going to go and get my Sharpie to mark that so I can see where the difference is. So I now know these three sides, it's all the same. I'll cut some off and mark it from the back. Okay, so I've got the Sharpie. I've just realised this is probably the most stupidest cock-handed way of doing this, but it's the Garage Workshop. If there's a stupid cock-handed way of doing something, I'll find it.
As I said a while back, I'm trying to be as precise as I can in my videos now, and this was definitely an example when I needed to do that, and I was really careful making this cut.
Okay, so I'm now doing what I probably should have done at the beginning, which is just putting on a little bit of double-sided tape, just to make it absolutely 100% lined up, and then I can measure all of the sides. Like I said, you know, this is a ridiculous way of doing this probably. It's so cold, I can barely peel back the tape. Off camera, I've actually had my gloves on. Like I said, we've got a cold snap in the UK at the moment. Right, so let's just make sure that's all properly lined up. Right, stick that down. Hopefully the tape will work. Okay, now let's check the measurements. Okay, so now all I'm going to do is mark out where I'm going to need to put the Forstner bit through and measure. I'll probably end up doing a bigger size than that. I'm not sure if I've got one exactly that size. I've got a specialist cabinet one, but that looks a bit bigger. And then I'm just going to pre-drill these holes, countersink them just a tiny, tiny little bit, just enough to get the screw in, because the screws I've got for this have actually got quite a large head on them. It's probably half of that, so I just need to be really careful doing that. So let's mark it out and start drilling.
I took my time with the Forstner drilling because I wanted to get this as absolutely spot on as I could, and as you'll see in a minute, there was only a little bit of tear out. This is speeded up, but I was going really, really slowly and trying my best to keep my arm as straight as I could, which wasn't easy, to be honest. Okay, so done it. There's a little bit of cut out on the back, but I can take that out with a knife. Nice clean hole on the top though. So let's move on to countersinking these. I think I'd chosen a 4.5mm drill bit to do this. No real reason, but it was about the right size of screw that I had for it. When I'd done that, it was just a case of opening up the hole, and I come to realise later I should have done this a bit wider. Okay, so it's done. And here is my Katsu router. So this is the moment of truth. Did it actually work? Fingers crossed it did. So this is where a little bit of the fun and games begun, because although I'd taken my time and I'd really tried to get these as accurate as I could, there was just one that wasn't seated properly. You can sort of see it top left as you're looking at the picture now, which was actually really quite annoying. Okay, so there is a slight problem with this hole. Every time I put the screw in, for some reason, it's lifting it off of the base rather than putting it in. I had the same with that one, so I've just drilled that out a tiny little bit, and it's now working really well. So I'm just going to slightly widen this hole because I don't think it's deep enough. That's probably a bit too deep now, but let's try it. The other two are absolutely fine. They're flush. They're perfectly set out. I just don't think this one just doesn't want to sit properly.
It's still not. It's very much on an angle, that one. I don't want to over tighten them either. Okay. So the block is on there now. Hopefully it's still all equal. Oops. Definitely equal that side. Equal that side. That side. And that side. So fellow woodworkers, here is the 3D printed base plate. As you can see, it's very similar to mine in size. It has a very deep groove cut in it, and this is the original disc, the original base plate. And as you can see, there's quite a bit of spare space in it. The only thing about this one is it is quite a bit bigger than mine in terms of depth. Actually, in terms of the square, it's pretty much exactly the same size, you know, which is good. And it's also completely square with mine, which is nice to know. So I'm going to use these two pieces of wood. I've got this piece of board. A lot of my board that's in my wood stack is sort of quite badly bowed, but this isn't. And this is literally just hard plywood, I think it is. It must be 6mm, I would say. So I'm just going to cut the strips out of this. Now, I don't have a factory edge on it. I can see that because there's different bits taken out at different stages all the way around it. So I'm going to run it through the table saw, get a completely straight edge. I'm going to do that all the way around. Once I've got one straight edge, I'll just keep filing it through. I'm just going to take a bit of it off. And this piece of wood is one that I took out of one of my projects earlier in the year, and I'm just going to run this into strips. So the edge of the strip is going to go on here, like that. And then the router will run against it. But obviously, I'm going to make enough that I can make sort of 4 out of it. So I'm going to measure this now. I'll start cutting this up. I'll obviously run it through into strips before I cut it up. But I've got the wood I need. Time to crack on.
I'm going to interrupt this main bit of the video to give a shout out for this little Chica. I've put a link to my review of it in the description, but since I did that review, I've used this a load and it has been so brilliant to have around the workshop. It's been a really, really good little tool. So the next thing I did, as I said, I just ran it all through the table saw just to make sure I had a straight edge on all of the sides. When that was done, I ran the strip through. This strip luckily was actually quite straight, so it was nice and easy to just shift it all through the table saw. As you can see, I'm really taking my time. I'm not pressing as hard as it looks like I am there, but I really did take my time, and I left myself with a spare strip should I have any problems in the future, which luckily I didn't need, but in case I needed another one. I then took them over to the miter saw, made sure I got them perfectly lined up, and then it was just a case of marking out the area, making sure the wood was on straight, and then cutting those bits through the table saw. If I'd have done this again, this I probably would have done differently. I think it was quite a lot for the router to go through that. I probably should have cut it on the table saw, but I got there in the end, and the cuts were really nice quality from that.
Okay, so I just cut these. I had set the camera up, for some reason my GoPro just dropped out. It might be the cold weather. It is freezing. It's -2. I think I might have mentioned that. So literally, I've just cut it in half, and the spare set that I had, I also cut those in half. Now, this is not a massive set. This is not going to be something for cutting huge holes. That is not the point of it. The point of this is for me to be able to cut sort of inserts into pieces of wood. It's not to do massive long cuts, because I've actually got something else which is going to come up in another video in the future for that. This is more just about cutting individual slots or spaces. So now I've got all 4 pieces and I know they're all completely straight because I've checked them. I'm going to just test it by cutting out a square in this piece of wood. It's quite hard, this piece of wood, but let's put it all together. I'll show you how it's going to connect, and then let's go for cutting out a square.
I think here I made a little bit of a miscalculation in terms of lining up these pieces of wood. I think on 2 sides or on 3 sides I got them lined up really well with the Sharpie line, but the other side I didn't as well, and I also decided to put the double-sided tape onto the wood rather than putting it onto the bottom of the jig. I just thought it was going to be easier that way. It's this bit here I don't think I lined them up probably as well as I could have done, because actually you shouldn't have been able to see the Sharpie line, and consequently at the end, as I'll tell you in a minute, I've got a little bit of a gap. You can see there on the right hand side of that line there's a sort of 1 mil, 1.5 mil gap, and that was where I went wrong. That should have been a little bit tighter. But having said that, the block of wood, you know, well, I won't spoil it, you'll see in a minute whether the block of wood fitted, but the actual jig performed exactly as I expected it to, and also the quality of the cut that I got out of it was really good as well, and all the way through it was so easy to use. It actually worked out exactly how I'd wanted it to, and let's face it, that doesn't always happen on the garage workshop, does it? So it was nice it worked.
So fellow woodworkers, as you can see, the hole is cut. The block fits in it perfectly. In fact, there's about a 2 mil gap on one side, and that's because when I was laying the wood up, I went outside the Sharpie line when I really should have been against it, and it would have been a perfect fit, but it is about 1 or 2 mil out the width of a Sharpie. But in terms of how it performed, I'm really pleased. Obviously these pieces of wood, there was a point where one of them slightly slipped, but luckily it was on the, as I was sort of going up, and it hasn't affected the overall slot. I'll give you a close-up of the slot. But overall, really pleased with how it worked. I mean, I know it was a lot of work because I had to mill all the sort of wood down myself first, but for what is something that is going to be used quite a lot in the workshop, I'm really pleased with that. Really simple to make, something you could make at home quite easily, obviously if you had the wood prepared, which I didn't. So really happy with it. Thank you so much for watching this week's video, fellow woodworkers. If it's the first time at the channel, please can I ask you to subscribe, like, comment, hit the notification bell. If you're a regular subscriber, thank you very much for watching. Please also don't forget to like and comment. I hope you have a fantastic week, fellow woodworkers, and I'll catch you on next week's edition of the Garage Workshop. Take care, everybody.